This is CNN.
In Los Angeles at this hour, federal indictments expected against 4 police officers, another chapter in the case that began with the videotaped beating of Rodney King. Welcome to NewsHour. I'm Bobbie Battista in Atlanta.
And I'm Reid Collins in Washington. The case that is blamed for the deadly rioting, the one that prompted a national debate over police use of force, is back in the spotlight today. In Los Angeles during this hour, the United States Attorney is expected to announce the indictments on federal charges of some of the policemen involved in the violent arrest of Rodney King. The arrest, caught on videotape, led to the trial on state charges of 4 of the officers last year, Sergeant Stacy Kuhn and officers Lawrence Powell and Theodore Brasino and Timothy Wynn. The officers were acquitted of all the charges except for one assault count against Powell the jury couldn't decide about. The verdict has sparked the Los Angeles riots, generally is credited with them, with the announcement, though, of the federal investigation coming shortly after the rioting. We are planning live coverage of today's Los Angeles announcement when it does happen.
While a truce hammered out between black gangs during the LA riots is keeping gang-related killings down in the city, in Los Angeles County, it's a different story. CNN's Greg Lamont reports.
The 20-year-old is dead. He was pronounced this morning at 4:30. And the other victim, the survivor, was shot in the head.
Just another typical day in the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department gang unit. The walls are filled with photos of dead gang members, and there's room for more.
This has been going on since the turn of the century, and the only difference is that the activities have increased to such a degree that it's catastrophic in nature.
Gang-related killings in the city of Los Angeles are down from last year. That's because many of the black gangs continue to honor a truce that was forged during the riots. Such is not the case in the county. Latino and Asian gangs are on a record pace for homicides because the gang population is growing and truce is not in their vocabulary.
People just pass by and they shoot. They shoot, and I guess shooting is fun, you know, but it's not fun. Because, you know, my friends of mine, they've been shot and they've been dead, you know, and that hurts me, you know. So that makes me mad. I want to go up to them and, you know, do what I got to do.
I don't think there'll ever be a truce. Not with us, anyways.
Why not?
I don't know. Just can't get along with nobody.
Got to keep going. It goes on, never going to stop.
It ain't going to die, it's just going to multiply. It's the way it is. Young kids grow up and that's all they know.
There were 771 gang-related killings last year in L.A. County. Those who work with gang members say they just can't envision the killings ever coming to an end.
They don't want to change. They'd rather leave it as is. They want to have the gang warfare, you know, with the other barrios. They don't want to forget what happened between them. They don't want to forget the homicides among them.
Why? Well, it's always been like this, you know.
These youngsters say the shootings must be slowing down because nobody in the neighborhood was killed in the last week. Greg Lamont, CNN, Los Angeles.
LA Mayor Tom Bradley is refusing to help fund an anti-gang program run by Los Angeles Cardinal Roger Mahoney. The Archdiocese was seeking $2.5 million from the city, but a letter Mayor Bradley sent the church says the program has no track record and doesn't deserve city funds. Cardinal Mahoney plans to lead a rally today to press Bradley again for money.
President Bush is taking the traditional route on the campaign trail today, while the Democrats are taking a road somewhat less traveled. Mr. Bush is in New York City at this hour, and then he heads out to Reno, then back to Colorado Springs, where he is to spend the night. In a speech to the Knights of Columbus, the president used an historical figure to demonstrate his current political situation.
I know that every speaker comes before you and says they identify with Columbus, but I really mean it. Think about it. The guy was faced with questions at home about whether his global efforts were worth a darn. Some critics want him to cut his voyage short. And he even faced the threat of mutiny. And yet Columbus persevered and won. Not a bad analogy in my view, so I know this isn't political.
The Democratic ticket, meanwhile, has set off on its second bus campaign tour. Bill Clinton and Al Gore launched their three-day stint in St. Louis just a couple of hours ago. They're driving through Missouri, Illinois, Iowa, Wisconsin, and Minnesota. Well, two more incumbent congressmen are on their way out. 13-term Michigan Republican Guy Vanderjacht was defeated in yesterday's primary by a political newcomer who did some of the campaigning on a bicycle. And Kansas Republican Dick Nichols also lost a bid for a second term. So far, 15 House members have been defeated in this primary season.
After much speculation on Ronald Reagan's role in the Iran-Contra scandal, the former president has been told that he is not a target in the 5-year criminal investigation of the affair. Reagan's only public testimony on the scandal was made in a videotaped deposition in 1990. Iran-Contra prosecutor Lawrence Walsh told Reagan in a letter last week that he is regarded as simply a witness in the investigation. Sirhan, the man who assassinated Senator Robert Kennedy, has been denied parole for the 7th time. Sirhan is serving a life sentence for the 1968 shooting of the senator from Massachusetts. The bullet struck Kennedy just after he claimed victory in California's presidential primary. Sirhan did not attend his parole hearing in California yesterday. He reportedly didn't want to wear the required security chain around his waist. He will get another chance at parole in 2 years.
Patients in many states in the United States are not guaranteed complete access to their medical records. A study by the consumer group Public Citizen finds that 33 states and the District of Columbia do not ensure patients access to all the medical data. Public Citizen says the records could play a crucial role in diagnoses.
When you go to the doctor with a complaint, the process involves taking a history, doing a physical, lab tests if appropriate, x-rays, electrocardiograms, making a diagnosis. Secondly, based on the diagnosis, recommending treatment, which may be a prescription drug, it may be a surgical procedure. But the whole logic leading from the complaint to the diagnosis to the treatment is hidden in the medical record. And unless people get their medical records, they may not be aware of the reasoning, or in some cases, the lack of reasoning that went from the complaint to the diagnosis to the treatment.
In an effort to help the patients get the medical records, Public Citizens developed a guide it calls Medical Records Getting Yours.
Just ahead on NewsHour, a snag in the line and a motor that quit. More problems for a high-flying, high-risk space experiment. CNN's Tony Clark will have the latest on the shuttle Atlantis. And wildfires in the west. The flames are roaring through timber, brush, and homes. We'll have an update.
I was seeing my parents off, and I realized...
Dad, what do you got in here? Gardening equipment?
They've planned their retirement for a long time.
Common sense says the time to plan for your future is today.
One day, it's going to be our turn.
And Fidelity Investments, America's largest mutual fund company, can help you begin.
Debbie? One day, Jeff sat down to figure out how much we'll have for retirement.
How's it going, Einstein?
Very funny. Take a look at
I thought we were doing a pretty good job. At this rate, we'll never retire.
Over 2 million Americans trust their retirement savings to Fidelity, with choices like Magellan Fund. Magellan's approach to stock investing has made it the #1 performing mutual fund for the past 15-year period. So call Fidelity now for this free booklet, a common sense guide to planning for retirement. You'll also receive everything you need to take your first step. Call 1-800-525-7700. Fidelity Investments. Common sense. Uncommon results.
Hot coffee and steak in front of strangers at 30,000 feet? Not till I switched. Now I fix it and forget it.
That's good. When people are watching you this closely, you just can't be worried about your dentures. That's why I fix it and forget it.
Fix-It-Dent holds stronger than any other adhesive. It even stands up to the hottest liquids.
Taste it, Grandpa.
He never would have tried this with his old adhesive.
For the strongest hold you can get, Fix-It-Dent and forget it.
If you see just one, hundreds more are in your walls. But cockroaches can't hide from the exterminator, the Orkin Man. The exterminator seeks out roaches with the awesome power of his advanced pest control technology. He attacks the crevices where roaches try to hide. But the exterminator stops them dead, guaranteed. The exterminator, the Orkin Man. One call destroys them all.
And CNN has learned that all 4 of the Los Angeles policemen who were acquitted in the Rodney King beating in a state trial have now been indicted on federal charges, and the U.S. Attorney's Office in Los Angeles is expected to announce the same in a few minutes, or at least within the hour. And when he does, we'll go there live. Bobbie?
Well, you can't say they haven't tried. They have 4 times, but the Atlantis astronauts can't seem to get the kinks out of their mission's most crucial experiment. CNN's Tony Clark joins us now with more live.
Bobbie, in fact, things have gotten worse since we last talked. Right now, the astronauts are unable to either reel any of that tether out of the 39-foot boom or reel it back in. That creates a potential problem, a problem that NASA ground controllers are looking at what to do about that satellite that is currently about 750 feet from the shuttle. The intention is to, once it was reeled out, to reel it back in and stow it in the payload bay. And so the problem right now, the concern right now, is also being able to, at some point, be able to reel it back in. If they can't do that, if there are no other solutions, they always have the option of cutting that tether and letting that satellite go free. There is no danger, has been no danger to the shuttle astronauts, but the team that has been up now for the last 4 hours, the team that's in charge of the deployment, for them, this has already been a short but frustrating day.
The shuttle's red team astronauts of Lauren Shriver, Jeffrey Hoffman, Franklin Chang Diaz, and Marcia Ivins continue to be frustrated Wednesday in their attempt to free a jam in the tether linking the shuttle and a half-ton electron-collecting satellite.
Again, the payload officer reported he saw no increase in tension whatsoever between the tip of the boom and the reel in Atlantis' cargo bay, an indication that the vernier motor did not engage when commanded to do so during that attempt.
That motor, which pulls the line off the reel, first caused problems Tuesday during the initial unsuccessful satellite release attempt, and again later when the shoestring-like tether jammed.
A new plan and another try has been concurred upon by all parties in the control center.
That plan? To reel in a short length of tether and use the thruster power in the satellite's jets to quickly cast the tether out, almost as if it were casting out a fishing line. But that failed too.
It seems like our problem is in the upper tether control mechanism, that the tether is somewhere not getting through there.
Despite the frustrations of trying to get the satellite and its lengthy tether strung out into the ionosphere, NASA officials say they have learned a lot about controlling tether motions. Commander Lawrence Shriver's been able to test a variety of maneuvers to steady the satellite and tether as it bounced and swayed, and each time he was able to bring it back in line and steady. But the real goal is still to string the satellite out, and that goal remains elusive. And that, again, because there apparently is a kink in that tether. It's a shoestring looking like tether made of copper wire covered in Kevlar. As it goes up that 39-foot boom that we have seen yesterday and today coming out of the payload bay, apparently someplace in that 39 feet, through some of the mechanisms that the tether travels, a kink has developed, and so now the astronauts can either pull the tether in or send it out, and that's the problem NASA ground controllers are working on now. Bobbie?
All right, Tony, thank you. And repeating our top story now, all 4 Los Angeles police officers acquitted on state charges have reportedly been indicted on federal charges. And prosecutors, U.S. prosecutors, will be holding a news conference momentarily. Stay with CNN. We'll take you live to Los Angeles.
Hello, 800 Flowers.
I just had a baby. Yeah, but my wife did, that is. Can I order flowers today?
To grow in this business, service is the name of the game, and that starts with our AT&T 800 number.
AT&T 800 service can play a part in your success story, no matter how small your business may be. For only $6 a month plus the cost of the calls you receive, you can have your own AT&T 800 number.
Sign it to the new grad. Way to go. Love and Beth.
And with AT&T 800 service, you can receive calls from any state you choose, and in most cases, your home state, right over the phone lines you have now. Call 1-800-358-6095 today, and you'll receive 1 month free with up to 40 minutes of 800 calls free.
We started with a small flower shop. Now we get 8,000 calls a day. We're not just growing, we're flourishing.
AT&T 800 service for just $6 a month. Call today to receive 1 month free with up to 40 minutes of calls free.
those whose romance with the road is rekindled with each sunrise. Beautiful mornings begin at 8. Super 8 Motels. 1-800-800-8000.
Recent attention has been focused on the plight of orphans in Yugoslavia, but what happened to the Romanian babies adopted and brought to the U.S.? A look at how they're faring today on Sonia Live, 1 p.m. Eastern, only on CNN.
An Air Force stealth fighter plane has crashed and burned in the New Mexico desert. The pilot ejected safely, walking to a nearby house for help. The plane went down near Holloman Air Force Base late yesterday, crashing into a storage building. The Air Force says the plane was on a routine training mission. 3 other stealth fighters have crashed during training missions in the past. The Air Force estimates each stealth fighter cost nearly $43 million.
A House subcommittee is debating a proposition from Defense Secretary Cheney about a new helicopter to replace that experimental B-22 tilt-rotor aircraft. 7 people were killed last month when a B-22 Osprey prototype crashed in the Potomac River. While the Marines support the Osprey program, Cheney has been a strong critic of it. Today, the acting Navy Secretary Sean O'Keefe told congressmen the Pentagon is seeking a lower-cost alternative. But some of the congressmen say there's more to consider than the bottom line.
What you're doing is now changing the parameters, and that's exactly the point that Congressman Aspen and Congressman Dellums were alluding to. And you know full well, having General Mundy sit next to you who reports to you, that if he gets the message loud enough, that this, in fact, is going to be a change in requirements, that, in fact, eventually you may win the battle and have the Marines cave in, because that's what it's going to be. It's going to be caving in not for the purpose of their mission and protecting the lives of the Marines, but because you have a budget parameter that you want them to fit this new alternative into.
The projected plan would include directing the V-22 contractors to come up with a new version of the Osprey and a conventional helicopter that might compete against the Osprey.
More reinforcements were called in today to help battle wildfires in the West. Dozens of forest fires have burned more than 260,000 acres across the West so far this week. Emergency management officials say 6 years of drought have left the region in an extremely hazardous fire situation. In southern Idaho, about 2,500 firefighters are battling dozens of blazes. One 17,000-acre fire has burned 8 homes and forced the evacuation of 100 others. And in Oregon, wind gusts have pushed flames to within 4 miles of the town of Rouge River. 2 homes have been destroyed and about 200 others evacuated.
A reminder that we're awaiting word from the U.S. Attorney's Office in Los Angeles on the indictments of the 4 policemen who were the arresters of Rodney King. When the word comes down, we'll go there live.
I've got a 6 a.m. flight. I've got to get some Z's.
Nitol safely helps you fall asleep fast, so you can get your Z's. Nitol or Maximum Strength Nitol.
Nitol will help you get your Z's.
Why are these people smiling? They've got Polidin for partials, with the power to clean the pearly part and the metal part in just 5 minutes. So get Polidin for partials, because, hey, it's good looking on almost everybody.
Before you freeze, remember this rule of thumb. Get Ziploc brand freezer bags with the gripper zipper. Tough, tiny teeth you can feel gripping, so you know freshness is locked in, freezer burns out. Do like me. Protect your ears. There's only one Ziploc.
Where can you use the Players Club card? Las Vegas, Atlantic City, the Caribbean, on cruise ships. Sometimes you just need to get away from it, all right? But these days, you gotta be smart about it. With a Players Club card, you save 50% off your room, 25% off food and drinks, up to 50% off shows. The Players Club card. Have some fun the smart way.
New members get 2 free nights in Las Vegas or Atlantic City when the club books their flights. Call toll-free right now. There's no obligation.
To Los Angeles now, where federal officials have summoned reporters for their announcement about further actions against police in the King case.
Deprivation of the constitutionally protected rights of Rodney King, while acting under color of law during his arrest on March 3rd, 1991. The 4 defendants are Stacy Kuhn, Lawrence Powell, Timothy Wind, and Theodore Briseño. Count 1 charges 3 of the defendants, that is Powell, Wind, and Briseño, who at the time were on-duty officers with the Los Angeles Police Department, with intentionally using unreasonable force in the arrest of Rodney King. Count 2 charges 1 defendant, Stacy Kuhn, who at the time was an on-duty sergeant in the Los Angeles Police Department, with willfully permitting and failing to take action to stop the unlawful assault on Rodney King by the 3 other defendants who were under the supervision of Kuhn. The charges are violations of Title 18 of the United States Code, Section 242, which upon conviction, the maximum penalty is 10 years imprisonment and $250,000 fine. Now, I want to commend the outstanding work that has been done by the agents of the Federal Bureau of Investigation in the conduct of this investigation. Also, the tireless work and effort on the part of the Civil Rights Division attorneys from the Department of Justice, as well as the Assistant United States Attorneys in my office. Now, I would like to introduce some of those people who are with me here today. To my right is Charlie Parsons, the special agent in charge of the Los Angeles office of the Federal Bureau of Investigation. And on my left are Barry Kowalski, who is the deputy chief of the Civil Rights Division in the Department of Justice, and an attorney from the Civil Rights Division of the Department of Justice, Alan Teeger. On my right is Assistant United States Attorney Stephen Clymer of my office and Assistant United States Attorney Lawrence Middleton of my office. Now, we'll be happy to answer a few questions that you have for us, subject, of course, to the restrictions that we are unable to comment on grand jury matters or any specific evidence.
Historically, how has the government done in cases like this?
What do you mean by done?
Accomplished.
Win, lose, or draw.
Yeah, win, lose, or draw.
Well, I think the government has a good record. Civil rights cases certainly are not easy cases, but I think the government does have a good record in that regard.
Can you explain specifically how these defendants violated Rodney King's civil rights?
Well, I believe if you'll look at the indictment, it will explain to you that the defendants are charged with stomping, kicking, and beating Mr. King. Therefore, it was an unreasonable use of force.
Can you tell us whether or not anybody was granted immunity from prosecution in connection with this investigation?
I'm not in a position to be able to relay that.
What makes you think that you'll succeed in this case when others before you have failed against these defendants?
Well, I'm assuming obviously you're referring to the state case. The federal case is a different case. I can't comment on the differences at this time. However, I will tell you that, as all of you know, the federal investigation began immediately after the incident came to light. It was then held in abeyance as soon as the state indictments came down. When the verdicts came out in the state case, then our investigation resumed. The federal grand jury evidence that has been adduced by the grand jury has been evaluated by career prosecutors in the U.S. Attorney's Office and career prosecutors in the Civil Rights Division of the Department of Justice. And that evidence has been analyzed and evaluated, and the unanimous conclusion is that the evidence amply supports the charges that are reflected in the indictment.
Would any use of force been justified against Mr. King? Or was it reasonable in the beginning and then became unreasonable? Or was the whole episode from start to finish unreasonable use of force?
I'm afraid you're asking me questions that really do impinge upon the grand jury investigation with regard to specific evidence. I'm sorry, I can't answer those questions.
Almost inevitably, you're going to face a request, or the court's going to face a request for a change of venue. What would be your position on that?
I don't believe a change of venue is supported at all. There is a big difference between the case that is being brought here. The jury pool draws from the Central District of California, which consists of 7 counties: Los Angeles County, Orange County, Ventura County, Santa Barbara County, San Luis Obispo County, San Bernardino County, and Riverside County. It encompasses 16 million people. I am very confident that we can find a fair and impartial jury from that pool.
Are you going to call Rodney King as a witness?
Well, that's premature. That decision will have to be made by the prosecutors that are prosecuting the case, and that is something that clearly will have to be made somewhere down the line.
Will you present any evidence
to the grand jury, which was different from what was presented by the state prosecutor?
Well, again, I can't speak about specific evidence that was introduced or presented to the grand jury because of the secrecy requirements. But I will tell you, as I mentioned before, that I do believe that the federal case does have differences from the state case.
Can you specify what those differences are?
No, I'm afraid I can't.
Will you wait to prosecute this until after the Powell retrial is over?
Why did we wait to prosecute it?
Will you wait as far as going ahead with trial?
We have not discussed that with the district attorney's office. Clearly, the indictment was just returned yesterday afternoon, and this is the first announcement of it. We will certainly be discussing it with the district attorney's office. We have had close cooperation with them throughout the investigation.
I believe that this...
No, we don't have a time frame. What we anticipate is the defendants, the attorneys for the defendants have been contacted, and we are in the process right now of inviting them to self-surrender tomorrow. Our expectation will be that they will have their initial appearance tomorrow, and the arraignments will be on Monday, at which time we expect to draw a judge, and then the trial will be set by the judge. We really don't control that.
What about bail? How will that work?
Bail will be done, the pretrial services traditionally will make a report and will make a recommendation to the court. So we can't really discuss what bail would or would not be until such time as we see those reports.
Does this mean that they would perhaps remain in custody throughout the weekend?
Not necessarily. It really all depends. As I said, right now what we have done is we're in the process of contacting the attorneys and inviting the defendants to self-surrender tomorrow. Presumably, if that happens, then it'll be up to the magistrate and the pretrial service report to decide what we're going to do about bail, if at all.
That's the 2 o'clock magistrate?
I'm really not sure exactly which calendar they'll be on.
Ms. Baird, you say that the investigation is continuing?
Yes, the investigation
The implication in all of that is that there may be more indictments returned. Is the FBI actively investigating? Is the U.S. Attorney planning to proceed with more witnesses to the grand jury?
Well, all I can... What do I mean by it? Just exactly that the investigation is not concluded. The investigation is still open. I cannot comment upon what charges we might be looking at or what individuals we might be looking at for the reason that I am really precluded from doing that because of the grand jury secrecy rules.
Mrs. Baird, given the flawless record of the defendants in making appearances in state court, why was it deemed necessary to seal the indictments and not contact the defendants after they were returned?
The indictment was sealed after it was returned late yesterday afternoon. The purpose for that was for public safety purposes. We had and discussed clearly with the Sheriff's Department and the Los Angeles Police Department as well as the state that we would be informing them at least that when an announcement would be coming and giving them some advance warning. The reason for the sealing was in order to permit us to do that.
So those law enforcement agencies were notified last night to be on
And so we have it indicted under federal statutes that date back just beyond the Civil War are the 4 officers involved in the alleged beating of Rodney King. Powell, Wind, and Briceño are charged with using unreasonable force in depriving Rodney King of his rights under color of authority, and that's the key here. While their Sergeant Stacy Kuhn, who was on the scene, is charged or indicted with willfully allowing these men to do that. Each is facing a maximum of 10 years in jail and or a fine of $250,000. This deprivation of civil rights statute has been employed mainly against policemen and or sheriffs, more frequently in some civil rights deprivation cases. Perhaps the most notable was in the mid-60s in the case of Schwerner, Cheney, and Goodman, 3 civil rights workers who were slain in Philadelphia, Mississippi, and some local authorities there were let free, having been charged and prosecuted by the state. The federal statutes then were brought to bear and convictions were obtained. The men are to report tomorrow and bail or bond will then be set. And NewsHour will continue.
NewsHour continues, followed by Sonia Live after this local commercial break. Next on CNN.
Hi, I'm Lee Greenwood. You know I'm proud to be an American. And this year we can all be proud as we celebrate the 500th anniversary of America. In commemoration of this special event, a VI Sing was produced, an amazing collector's gift kit. Amazing because it's entertaining and educational, and a historical keepsake for yourself, as a collector, or for loved ones of all ages. This amazing kit contains interesting historical information with unique songs characterized by such patriotic artists as Barry Sadler, Ed Bruce, Merle Kilgore, and Cherokee Tribal Ambassador Richard Crowe. It contains an album, a booklet of sheet music with lyrics and history on each song, plus a colorful 17-month calendar documenting America's 500th anniversary and its discovery. So call the number on your screen right now, and you'll receive all 3 items in this beautiful collector's edition gift box for this special low price. Truly a once-in-a-lifetime gift, and a keepsake for all time. Don't miss out. Order now.
This is CNN.
Checking the top stories at this hour. As we've just heard, the 4 L.A. police officers tried in the videotaped beating of Rodney King now face federal charges. A short time ago, the U.S. Attorney in Los Angeles announced all 4 had been indicted on charges of violating King's civil rights. Earlier this year, the officers were acquitted of state criminal charges in connection with the beating, except one assault count against Lawrence Powell. The jury deadlocked on that count. The acquittals sparked the Los Angeles riots. Ronald Reagan can breathe a bit easier. His attorney says he's been told the former president is not a target in the Iran-Contra criminal investigation. In videotape testimony 2 years ago, Reagan said he couldn't recall approving the arms for hostages deal. A letter from Iran-Contra prosecutor Lawrence Walsh suggests his 5.5-year criminal investigation has not turned up any evidence of wrongdoing on Reagan's part. President Bush pushed for family values this morning during an address to the Knights of Columbus, a Catholic service organization. While he was denouncing abortion and urging a return to prayer in the public schools, a noisy group of AIDS activists protested outside. For the president's Democratic challengers, it is the bus tour part 2. Bill Clinton and Al Gore headed off today on a 3-day bus trip along the Mississippi River.
It is time to check the financial world now. Let's go to CNN's Bill Hartley, who's at the business news desk in New York. Bill?
Well, thanks, Reid. A second down day on Wall Street. More profit-taking following last week's surge and some declines in the blue chips IBM and General Motors dragging down the market. Dow Jones Industrial Average is off about 12 3/4 points at 33.71 2/3. Big board volumes active today, 92 million shares changing hands. Our other key indexes all posting losses as well. Among the biggest movers on the big board, IBM falling by 2. Smith Barney lowered its 1992 and 93 earnings estimates for Big Blue. Ford Motors down 7/8, General Motors falling by 1 1/8. Payne Weber is lowering its earnings forecast for the 2 automakers through next year, citing sluggish demand. But Walmart is bucking the downtrend. It's gaining 1 1/8. The discount store giant named Stock of the Week by Merrill Lynch. The latest reading on the U.S. economy underscores the uneven recovery. The Federal Reserve's handbook, a survey of economic activity across the country, highlighting the uneven growth. While retail sales showed improvement in some regions, overall, they remain weak. Same can be said for loan demand and real estate. Home building and sales remain basically unchanged. One bright spot appears to be in manufacturing. It showed only modest increases across the country. Government bonds are moving higher following that report. The Treasury's 30-year bond up about 0.5 point in price, and that takes the yield to 7.38%. The dollar barely moving. It is up 2/3% against the British pound, virtually unchanged against the Japanese yen and the German mark. The nation's second largest toy store closing its doors for good next month. Child World confirmed it will close its remaining 71 stores and lay off roughly 1,800 employees. The announcement comes on the heels of the collapse of merger talks between Child World and Lionel, the nation's number 3 chain. Child World filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy protection in May and closed 54 stores. That's the latest in business. Another update in 1 hour. I'm Bill Hartley at the CNN Business News Desk in New York.
Well, in and around Sarajevo, some of the heaviest fighting in weeks. Tracers lighted the skies overnight as Bosnian government forces traded fire with Serbians. Civilians who ventured out today to stock up on water and bread ran instead for their lives at times when the shells came crashing into central Sarajevo. So fierce has been the fighting that UN peacekeepers are now assessing whether they can stay there. The humanitarian airlift has been suspended for 3 full days starting yesterday due to shelling in and around the airport. The International Red Cross is responding to reports that Serbs have committed atrocities at detention camps in Bosnia. IRC teams are awaiting permission to enter the camps in the combat zones and inspect them. They have visited 9 others run by all of the sides, the Serbs, the Croats, and the Muslims too. One official terming conditions unacceptable in them. Concerns over possible human rights violations today prompted the United States to ask for an emergency meeting of the UN's Commission on Human Rights.
In Kuwait, heavy U.S. military equipment is arriving virtually every hour. Everything from field artillery to bulldozers being offloaded from U.S. Navy hovercraft onto piers in Kuwait City. It's all part of Operation Eager Mace, a joint military exercise involving U.S. Marines and Kuwaiti forces. Many of the Marines are veterans of the Persian Gulf War. Eager Mace is one of 3 war games to be held in Kuwait this month. As the military exercises unfold in Kuwait, medical officers and U.S. veterans officials are evaluating the lessons of the Gulf War. CNN's medical correspondent Andrew Holtz has today's news from medicine.
In early 1991, U.S. medical officers faced sobering questions. Were they ready to care for casualties of a ground attack on Iraq? Did they have enough supplies, the right people, in the right places? Those questions are still before officers who are evaluating their Gulf War experience.
We were able to demonstrate that we could carry enough supplies to support those facilities and that we could take on a worst-case scenario. And then, thank God, we were able to demonstrate readiness, and we didn't have to demonstrate our capability.
Even though medical teams were not tested by a flood of Allied casualties, there were things they would change, such as the practice of calling up reserve medical personnel unit by unit.
Sometimes we have to be able to call up individuals that have certain capabilities, certain skills, rather than call up an entire unit.
Despite complaints that call-ups severely disrupted medical practices at home, officials say most reserve medical personnel have stayed on. The Department of Veterans Affairs wants to evaluate and track the health of Gulf veterans in order to look for long-term effects of service. Years after service in Vietnam, some people said the defoliant Agent Orange was to blame for unusual cancers. That link remains a matter of dispute.
We learned some hard lessons in Vietnam and the Agent Orange experience in particular, because it was much more difficult to go back 10, 15 years.
Officials wonder if Gulf veterans might report lung problems years after exposure to blankets of petrochemical smoke from burning oil wells. And there have been other questions raised about the risk of infections possibly picked up during Desert Storm. A databank of individual health records and detailed service histories could help spot patterns and settle future claims for compensation, either in favor of the veteran or the government. The registry would include mental health data. 23,000 Gulf veterans have contacted counseling centers, centers which did not exist for veterans just returning from earlier conflicts. Officials say swift military sweeps like that seen in the Gulf conflict complicate their job. They are still trying to figure out how to move field hospitals fast enough to keep up with the troops who may need them. Andrew Holtz, CNN Medical News, Washington.
News from Medicine is brought to you by Bristol-Myers Squibb Company, makers of Bufferin. For strong aspirin pain relief, discover the strength of Bufferin.
Boy, this couch weighs a ton. Where does it go, Miss Lansbury?
Oh, right there, please. Wow. If I lifted that, I'd need Bufferin for the aches and pains afterwards.
You really believe in Bufferin?
I certainly do.
It's strong, huh?
Extra strength Bufferin has the strongest dosage of aspirin that you can buy. And I've discovered that the buffers don't weaken it. They just help prevent aspirin stomach upset.
Shouldn't you discover the strength of Bufferin? And for nighttime aches, pains, and sleeplessness, try Bufferin AF Nighttime. It's aspirin-free.
Tonight on Sports Tonight, epic battles. First from Barcelona, Mike Powell owns the world record. Carl Lewis, an international superstar. They start the long jump, plus the Braves and Reds. Highlights and interviews. See you at 11 o'clock Eastern tonight.
Freedom's the one.
Only one gum leads the way when you've got dental work, and that's Freedent. Freedent won't stick to your dental work, so you can be confident chewing it. And because it also moistens your mouth and freshens your breath, Freedent's in a class by itself.
Freedom's the one that took the stick out of gum, and Freedent moistens your mouth. Yeah, moistens your mouth and freshens your breath while you chew.
Non-stick Freedent moistens your mouth and freshens your breath.
With the uncertainty of today's real estate market, many would-be home buyers have adopted a wait-and-see attitude. Your Coldwell Banker agent, on the other hand, thinks it's time to wake up to the possibilities. Home prices may never be this affordable again. Interest rates may never be this attractive. Altogether, it's a great time to buy a home. All it takes is opening your eyes to the opportunities and knowing who to call. Coldwell Banker. Expect the best.
For cleaning, shining, and disinfecting, nothing outperforms us in the bathroom. Dow Bathroom Cleaner, starring Scrubbing Bubbles. We work hard so you don't have to.
A new possible solution has emerged to the Space Shuttle Atlantis' problems with that tethered satellite. CNN's Tony Clark joins us now again with this update.
Bobbie, it's a solution that NASA officials wish they didn't have to be considering. They're talking about now perhaps doing a spacewalk later today, probably more likely sometime tomorrow, to get rid of the kink, to take care of the problem, the kink that is in that 39-foot tall tower, that boom. The tether is kinked up someplace there. What NASA officials have done is gone back to Hubble to look at all of the options, and spacewalk is only one of a handful of options being discussed. Among the other ones are to take the robot arm, the shuttle's robot arm, which is currently in the stow position, and use the camera on that to get a better idea of where that kink is in the boom. There's also some discussion of moving that boom up and down a little bit to see if that could be a potential way of freeing the kink. And then the third option being discussed is also a spacewalk. Commander Lawrence Shriver told Mission Control a short time ago that he and his fellow astronauts had also talked about that. They had discussed some of the potential problems that a spacewalk might have, but that remains a very viable option. It appears now, and I stress the word appears, that NASA's concern mostly is to bring that satellite in rather than to continue trying to extend it the 12.5 miles on tether to try and perform the experiment. What they want to do is salvage the $243 million satellite, be able to bring it back into the shuttle's payload bay so it can be stowed and brought back to Earth. Right now, as I say, the NASA ground controllers are huddling, and we will bring you the latest when they decide how best to tackle this rather vexing problem. Reid?
All right, thank you, Tony. They don't have tetherball as an Olympic sport yet, but let's find out what they do have and go to Jim Huber. Jim?
They're really out of this world, though, Reid. Dave very nearly pulled a Dan today, and the U.S. women's basketball team did. What a rather awkward day in Barcelona for some of the Americans. Dave Johnson began his quest for the decathlon championship by very nearly fouling out in the shot put. He scratched in that event 3 times, which would have eliminated him. But a judge then reviewed the third scratch, reversed it, and his retoss turned out to be a personal best. Still, he stands only 9th, with his best events yet to come. The real stunner, however, came with the heavily favored U.S. women's basketball team going for a 3rd gold medal, beaten today by the unified team 79-73 in the semifinals. The best now that they can do is a bronze. Their first loss in the Olympics since a gold medal game in 1976. That one to the Soviet Union as well. What a night in baseball on this side of the pond. Highlights and all the scores when we return after this short break.
Every year, millions of people buy Moen faucets because they work so well.
Well, I like the way it looks.
And because they last so long.
It's got style.
Then there's the lifetime limited warranty against leaks and drips.
It looks great.
Like I said, buy it for looks, buy it for life. Moen.
All across America, more people repurchase Kenmore appliances than any other brand. In fact, over 1 out of 2 homes in the country count on Kenmore. And now, in celebration of Kenmore's 65th anniversary, count on saving $100 on this 4.8 peak horsepower Kenmore canister vacuum with double brushes and beater bar. And save $60 on this matching large capacity heavy duty washer dryer pair. Kenmore, only at the store you trust.
The formula was developed by a surgeon. Now, from the makers of Preparation H, new, soothing, alcohol-free cleansing tissues. They clean and refresh after hemorrhoid attacks. New cleansing tissues. From the makers of doctor-recommended Preparation H.
These are the heroes who've united to take on the world. And this is their story. America's Dream Team, the quest for Olympic gold. This book traces